Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to be speaking about transcending consciousness. Discover how to transcend ordinary awareness and access the three inner dimensions that surpass consciousness. Over the history of the Jewish people, we know that Am Yisrael has transformed the world in one way or the other. So I wanted to explore that transformation, see where it comes from, and see how we can apply it to us. If I were to rename this class, I would call it the true law of attraction. But I would add one word which you don't have in what they call the law of attraction. I would call it the true law of attraction and transformation. Let's begin. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to do this even though it's not my style. If you want us to reach more people, subscribe to our channel. So, the story is like this. When God created the world, it says in Kabbalah that he emanated his light through 10 vessels. The 10 vessels that were supposed to contain and channel God's light were not able to contain that light, and therefore there was what we call in Hebrew, in Kabbalistic language, Shvirat HaKelim, a explosion of the vessels. In these vessels, you had sparks of godliness that stuck to them. Now, we're not talking about physical vessels. But you see what happens is there are two dimensions in the way God appears, exists. There is the essence, and then there is the emanation. Just like by us, we are made at God's image. There is the level which is essential. What's in my heart, for example, is essential. What's in my mind is essential. And there is the emanation. There is the speech. There is the body language, and so on and so forth, which is the emanation of what's in my heart and what's in my mind. And that's why you have a lot of people that by reading body language, even though a person says something, he emanates and he sends a message which is much greater than what comes out of his mouth. We'll be talking about that a little later. So there is God's essence and there's God's emanation. The emanation of God is the vessel. The vessel is there and was at the moment that God emanated his light, put his light in these vessels, and they broke. These pieces of emanation, so to say, eventually came down from level to level till they came down into the creation of this physical world. And our goal, the Jews, is to elevate the sparks and reconnect them to their source. I've said this many times. When I was 10 or 11 years old, my parents, they should live long and be well, used to take me to Atlantic City to my uncle of blessed memory, and he had a little motel. At the time, the phone system was a switchboard. Switchboard, for those of you who are too young to know what a switchboard is, there is a wall with a bunch of wires and plugs at the end of each wire. And there's a platform, a table with a bunch of holes. Sir, hello? And I used to love, as a kid, to be the switchboard operator. Hello, you want room 210? You pull the wire and you plug it in 210. And you do this each time somebody else calls. In essence, every Jew is God's switchboard operator. The higher the Jew, which means the holier, the more connected he is, in his level of bonding and connection to God, right, the greater connections he creates between these sparks of godliness, which are hidden in the reality of this world, and their source. Because at the end, what is the purpose of the end of times? The time of Mashiach, what's going to happen is that all these sparks will not only be elevated to their source, but they will be revealed. Will go from going to a state of darkness and an obscure place to a place where we're able to recognize and see the power of the Creator within the creation. Imagine just like those who study quantum physics, right, are able to understand that matter is one, and therefore the external matter does not matter, really. It's just the density of matter and the way it's organized. So where there is a concept in Kabbalah that basically the whole creation is letters. The letters, which are energies, which create the world every second and every moment. Now we don't see it because that is the challenge that we have. The challenge that we have is that we live in a physical body, our souls live in a physical body and in a physical world, and therefore we are challenged by what we see. When we go to a deeper level of connection, we are able to see more than what meets the eye. And at that moment, we connect ourselves and we connect the world to God. Now, even if you're not able to see what meets more than meets the eye, God gave us a guide, which is the Torah, and 248 positive commandments, and 365 negative commandments: do not kill, do not steal, etc. And you should be charitable, and you should pray, and so on and so forth, and all the mitzvot. You should put on tefillin, and a woman should go to the mikveh, you should keep Shabbat. All these things are modalities, channels, in order for us to use physicality and actually elevate it and reveal within it its purpose. That's why we are not like any other type of religion. Judaism is not a religion. Judaism is a way of life, it's a way of connection. And that's why the mitzvot that we have are not like other faiths where you separate yourself from the world in order to be holy, but rather the holiness is within you. That's what's important. The holiness is in every act. From the simple act of eating to intimacy, all of them are part of this umbrella of holiness. Now, what happens is like this. Throughout the generations, at the time that we were in the desert, when we came out of Egypt, God asked us to do what's called a mishkan. What's a mishkan? The word mishkan comes from the word in Hebrew shachen. Shachen translated as a neighbor today in modern Hebrew, but shachen means to dwell, a dweller. Mishkan is the dwelling place of God throughout the journeys in the desert. Throughout the journeys in the desert, we have different elements which are enemies, which are fighting against us, because the desert is a no land. Nothing grows in the desert. There are scorpions, there are snakes, and so on and so forth. And with the Mishkan, and specifically the ark, us going into the desert, going into this hostile type of environment, we went with the Torah. We had to go out in order to be able to reveal the sparks which are hidden in such a hostile type of environment. This was one level of transformation and revelation of the godly sparks. Later on, we enter the land of Israel. King Solomon, which is the 15th generation since Abraham, our forefather, is going to build a temple. When King Solomon builds the temple, there is a shift in the world and a shift in nature that happens. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. Why is he called Shlomo? Our sages explain to us that the word Shlomo, the name Shlomo, comes from the word Shalom. Melech, the king, Shehashalom Shelo, the king which is the master of peace. Or should I say, he is a masterpiece, right, with a E-A-C-E. So, why was Shlomo a master of peace in his time? If you look at the cycle of the moon is that the Rosh Chodesh, the moon is only a dot. At the end of the month, when you come a new Rosh Chodesh, it's a dot. In the middle of the month, on the 15th, it is a full moon. The holiday of Sukkot and the holiday of Pesach, Passover, is celebrated on a full moon. The full moon is the perfect, complete union of the recipient, emanation, as we said before, and the source of light, which is the sun. King Solomon is the 15th generation. He is the one which is able to bring about the dwelling, Shachen, the Shekhinah, God's presence down here in the world with the building of the temple. Now, I just want to mention a very important detail that will make that there's a difference on how the temple affected the world versus the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle that accompanied the Jewish people. The tabernacle in the desert was made of things that come from vegetation and from animal skin. The temple was made of stone. Just like when you go to the Kotel, you see these enormous stones, which is always a wonder how they did it. How did they move such enormous, very heavy stones? But that's not the discussion for today. Why stone? And why was that called Bet Olamim, the eternal house for God? The first temple is stone, second temple is stone, third temple, Bezrat Hashem, will be made of stone. The tablets, the 10 commandments, were given in stone. What is this concept of stone? In the world, there are 4 dimensions of life. There is mineral life, stones, salt, and all these things that don't move and don't evolve, but have a godly life in them, very hidden. And then you have higher than that vegetation. It grows. It has a certain level of life. Then you have higher than that animal life, which has a greater level of life. And then you have mankind, which has a greater level than life. Then you could say you have the Jew, which is attached to Torah and therefore has a greater level of life because he is striving to be godly. You would think that if anything, God should not dwell in stone. It's the thing that has the least life, is almost lifeless. The opposite is true. Whenever you study Chassidut and Kabbalah, you should know there's a concept which is a basic, very important concept, that whatever is higher falls lower. It doesn't mean that it falls lower because it is intrinsically low. It means because it is so high, it is able to penetrate to the lowest possible levels in order to elevate them. So what happens is that when we were in the desert, yes, we had the sparks of godliness which are being elevated by the tabernacle. But we were still in a state of vegetation and animal, which means the elements which were the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was made with. Here, we're making something which is solid. It's a house for God, a house for the dwelling of God, which is made of stone. And therefore, there it can really receive the presence of Hashem, and we are elevating the lowest levels and showing that the lowest level, which is stone, which is inanimate, is united with the highest level. At the time of King Solomon, something happened which is extraordinary. Nations of the world were leaving their countries, kings and queens. Amongst them, there was a queen by the name of Sheba. She was the queen of Ethiopia. She came all the way from Ethiopia to Jerusalem. She was drawn just like a magnet draws another piece of metal towards it. She was drawn to the temple and transformed herself. And actually, I think she converted in order to hear the wisdom of King Solomon and to bask in the holiness of the temple. And this happened from all over the world. The whole region, from far and near, got close to Shlomo. So here, the way that Shlomo, King Solomon, elevated the sparks was not by going into a reality which is hostile like the desert, but rather by staying put where he was and building the temple. He was able to attract those sparks of godliness which were already revealed which were already open, an open channel, and he drew them towards him. Now, what is the difference between that and what we said before the tabernacle? Now we're going to take it home, we're going to take it to ourselves. But before we do that, let's go to the third level of what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. What is going to happen when the third temple is built and Mashiach reveals himself? At that moment, there'll be a level of consciousness where not only those who are open will be drawn to the temple and drawn to God and drawn to godliness, but even those who are closed up will realize without having to be transformed. It's one thing, there were people at the time of King Solomon were drawn to the temple and then they would transform themselves. At the time Mashiach comes, everyone, wherever he is, once that consciousness is in a perfect state of fusion with the physical world, everyone, wherever they are, will realize that their existence is from the essential existence of God. And they realize that really God is their true source of life, and therefore they will not even have to go to the temple in order to be transformed. Where they are, they will be transformed. So we explained 3 levels. First level is, I go into a hostile place and I try to take things which are very hidden and very hostile, and I take the sparks out. Second level, I am in my place and I'm able to draw those who are open to it, and the transformation happens when they come close to me. Third level, I'm able to affect those who are far and near without them having to come to me, and they will experience transformation in their own personal connection where they are without having to come closer physically. These 3 levels are 3 individuals, 3 dimensions, 3 levels of being, states of being, amongst what we call the righteous, the holy Jews. We know that one of the things that we believe in as Jews is that there are tzaddikim, there are righteous, holy Jews, which live a level of connection and fusion, like we said before, which is at a much higher level of consciousness than we do. If we are conscious of the physical world and are always fighting against this default mode of wanting to be part of a bigger, more physical, more pleasurable life, physical life for the pleasure of the body, they live in a different dimension. Their default mode is to connect to God. and to see godliness in everything. Now, and therefore, tzaddikim can perform miracles. There are three levels in this. There is the person which is called the tzaddik. Tzaddik is somebody which is righteous. Righteous, that person, we're going to first state the three things: righteous, upright, and chassid, pious. Right? Three levels. The person which is at the level of righteousness, because how do you become righteous? What is righteous in Hebrew? Tzaddik. Righteous is basically somebody which has been able to take control of all his drives and desires, and his body is subservient to the will of God, which means he is aligned with will, with something which is higher than him. You understand? We have intellect, we have emotion, we have something which is called the will. What is the power of will? Will overrides thought, speech, intellect and emotion. Right? Thank God I'm moving my hand like this, thank God, every day for this, without me having to think of the process of moving my hand, without me having to feel that I want to move my hand. Why? Because the level of will is something which is above the mind, and it overrides the intellect and the emotions in order to bring will. There are people that live in that dimension of will where they have become a master of their will. That is what we call a tzaddik. Somebody that is a master of will. It's more than being a master of your emotions and master of your intellect. It's higher than that. Even the will, which normally overrides intellect and emotion, you're a master of your will. That person has the power, just like our Mishkan, our tabernacle in the desert, to take a hostile situation, a hostile environment, and break it in order to elevate the sparks which are in it. Reveal the sparks which are, reveal the godliness and the good which is in it. And that's why it says, Tzaddik gozer, Hashem mikayem. The tzaddik, the righteous, has the power with his mouth to decree and change and break nature. Then you have a higher second level, which is the level of pleasure. There is a person which is a master of will. Then you have a person which is a master of pleasure. When I talk about pleasure, we have different pleasures that we seek naturally. The highest pleasure a person can experience, right? Each one has the pleasures that he can experience, right? Could drive a person to look for lust and things of the sort. And a person which is able to take all of the pleasure that he has and make it a godly pleasure, he is not called a tzaddik. He is higher than tzaddik. He is called an upright person. Yashar. Yashar in the sense that he is aligned, that all of his pleasure is godly. And therefore, because his pleasure is godly, he has the power to awaken in the creation, not to be broken. He doesn't have to break nature in order to connect it to God, to make that fusion with his will. He will bring nature to do his will just naturally and in a way of pleasure. I'm going to give you an example to make the difference between the first level and the second level. You have a teacher like the teachers we had 40 and 50 years ago, which broke the student in order to get them to do what they want. Parents that imposed and they got what they wanted. But then you have a new level of education where you have the true educator, which brings out the pleasure in the student to do the right thing. That individual, because he's able to bring something which is called zolel, motzi yakar mizolel, he's able to transform an individual and show him how pleasurable it is to connect to his inner connection to God. God makes that the nature of the world is ready to participate and with pleasure will subjugate itself to what the tzaddik wants. Here the transformation is greater. This is the level of Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. That's why he was able to awaken those who are already predisposed to connect. He was able to awaken the pleasure in them connecting with God, and that's how he got so many people from the whole world joining him. Then you have someone which is of a third level. What is that third level? It's a much deeper level than pleasure. It's a level of connection where the individual is one with the infinite. Which means not only does he dominate his will, not only does he dominate his pleasure, it's no longer my pleasure of connection with God. It's rather me and God are completely one. I recognize that my whole essence and my whole being is godliness. And since God is infinite, therefore all possibilities are infinite. I don't need to annul a decree. I don't need to say something in order to annul God's decree. Everything is reformatted and rethought in a way that there's no decree to annul. Because God is infinite, there's no past, present, and future. Therefore, whatever appeared, the reality that appeared to be negating or a God or negating something good, is just retransformed. That's the level of Mashiach. And that's why everybody will be retransformed. In our personal lives, whenever we want to attract good to us, we need to be able to get out of ourselves. We cannot do it only intellectually. Those who live an intellectual Judaism or an emotional Judaism and no more than that will be stuck to a certain dimension of connection where they will not be able to connect and overcome these limitations. They will be blocked. Once you're able to access the will, you become a master of your will. You take control of the will. That's number one. Then you start taking control of your pleasures. And then you realize that really you are connected to the source of all things, all creation, which is infinity. At that moment, you realize that everything is infinity. Everything is a result of infinity. I am a result of infinity, and therefore everything is possible. How do we do this? The Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, which is Hasidism, and the Torah of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, especially the Rebbe in his generation, has created, which means has revealed the path through the study of Tanya, the study of Hasidus, right? Hasidut, has revealed these tools to be able to transform our natures, not to change your natures, not to break your natures, to reveal within your nature the capacity it has to be able to cleave on and to fusion itself with its source. I hope this was not too intellectual, and that the concepts that I expressed today were clear. Definitely everybody wants to go out with some type of practical tool in your hands. I would say the best tool I could give you would be to take 5 minutes a day to study Tanya. Which chapters in Tanya specifically? I would tell you to start with chapters 41 and 42 in Tanya, or the book which is called Shar HaYichud VeEmunah, the Gate of Unity and Faith, which is 12 chapters. Every day, give yourself 5 minutes to study and contemplate on the concept. Study, contemplate on the concept. Slowly but surely, you will see that your vision of the world, your vision of situation changes, and as the change occurs inside of you, everything will be transformed around you. To conclude with a prayer for our brothers and sisters in Israel and our soldiers. Mishe berach avo